He was a church deacon, a man people trusted with their prayers, their secrets, and even their children. On Sunday mornings he preached about forgiveness. But when the sun went down, he became something else entirely. In May of 1996, 2 women vanished from the streets of Tampa. Days later, their bodies surfaced in a pond, just yards away from church property. And the man responsible wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows. He was one of their own. Nearly 30 years later, the same man sat on death row, waiting to die by lethal injection, making Florida history as the oldest inmate ever executed in the state. His name was Samuel Lee Smithers. To his congregation, he was a man of God. To the world, he became known as the Deacon of Death. October 14th, 2025, 6:15 p.m. Inside Florida State Prison in Stark, after 26 years, 2 months and 16 days on death row, Samuel Lee Smithers faced his fate. He was 72 years old, the oldest person ever executed in Florida's modern era. The room was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Witnesses sat behind glass as the lethal injection began to flow. When asked for his final words, Smithers looked up and said only 3. "No, sir." And just like that, the man once trusted to lead Sunday prayer became a statistic. The 14th execution that year, the most in state history. For the families of Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, it was the moment they'd waited nearly 3 decades to see. For others, it raised a question that lingered long after the execution was over. How does a respected church deacon become a double murderer? To answer that, we have to go back to where it all began, back to Plant City, Florida. Before the world knew him as the Deacon of Death, Samuel Smithers was just another face in Plant City. Quiet, polite, dependable. He was the kind of man people waved to on Sunday mornings. A husband, a father, a deacon who kept the church spotless and the lawns trimmed. If someone needed help fixing a leaky faucet or mowing the church grounds, Samuel was the first to show up. He spoke softly, carried his Bible everywhere, and never raised his voice. To his neighbours, he was harmless, maybe even humble. To his congregation, he was the embodiment of faith and service. No one looked at him and saw danger. But beneath that calm exterior was something fractured. Years of hidden trauma, a mind shaped by violence, head injuries, and a desire for control that no sermon could silence. In the spring of 1996, that darkness finally broke through. And 2 women, Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, would pay the price. Before the world knew him as the Deacon of Death, Samuel Smithers was just another face in Plant City. Quiet, polite, dependable. He was the kind of man people waved to on Sunday mornings. A husband, a father, a deacon who kept the church spotless and the lawns trimmed. If someone needed help fixing a leaky faucet or mowing the church grounds, Samuel was the first to show up. He spoke softly, carried his Bible everywhere, and never raised his voice. To his neighbours, he was harmless, maybe even humble. To his congregation, he was the embodiment of faith and service. No one looked at him and saw danger, but beneath that calm exterior was something fractured, years of hidden trauma, a mind shaped by violence, head injuries, and a desire for control that no sermon could silence. In the spring of 1996, that darkness finally broke through. And 2 women, Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, would pay the price. To understand how a trusted church leader became a killer, you have to go back. Long before the crimes, long before the title deacon. Samuel Lee Smithers was born on January 30th, 1953, in a small Tennessee town where everyone knew each other's names and everyone kept their problems behind closed doors. Behind the Smithers family door, there was no peace, only fear. His father was violent, his mother deeply religious, and both believed punishment was the only way to control sin. When Samuel was just a baby, he fell from his crib and struck his head hard on the floor. His family never took him to a doctor. The injury went untreated, a silent wound that would follow him for the rest of his life. As he grew, that household became a place of pain. His father's fists, his mother's belt, and something far darker. She believed her children were possessed by evil spirits. She would line them up one by one and whip them while shouting prayers, claiming she was beating the devil out. For young Samuel, religion and violence became the same thing. Pain meant purity. Control meant safety. By the time he reached adulthood, his mind had learned to hide, to cover fear with obedience and darkness with devotion. Years later, when people looked at him and saw a gentle man of faith, they couldn't see what had been buried underneath. A lifetime of chaos, and a brain wired by trauma to find calm only through destruction. By his late 20s, Samuel Smithers seemed to have moved on. He had a wife, a son, and a church community that saw him as dependable and kind. But beneath that calm exterior, something was still burning. Literally. In the early 1980s, while serving as a deacon and volunteer firefighter in Tennessee, a string of fires began breaking out around his church. The first blaze started during a Sunday service. Kerosene poured across the floor, flames racing up the walls. Firefighters rushed to the scene, and among the first to arrive was Smithers himself. The congregation called him a hero for helping put it out. But then another fire started, and then another. Each time Smithers was right there, first to report it, first to help. Eventually, investigators noticed a pattern. The man running toward the flames was also the one lighting them. When police brought him in for questioning, Smithers didn't deny it. He confessed immediately. He described in detail how he poured the kerosene, struck the match, and watched the destruction unfold. But what he said next left detectives speechless. He told them that setting fires aroused him, that the chaos, the heat, the destruction made him feel powerful. And when he showed up to help, he felt like a hero cleaning up his own sin. In his mind, it wasn't just about fire, it was about control, creating disaster, then pretending to be the saviour who stopped it. Smithers served time for the arsons. He followed the rules, stayed quiet, and kept his urges buried deep. When he got out, he returned to his wife, his son, and eventually to the church. Everyone believed he'd been redeemed. No one realised the flames inside him had never gone out. After serving his sentence for arson, Samuel Smithers walked out of prison determined to look like a changed man. He went back to Florida, back to his wife Sharon and their young son Jonathan, and back to the one place that had always given him purpose, the church. Plant City's First Baptist Church welcomed him with open arms. He was polite, hard-working, and grateful. He never spoke about the fires or the years behind bars. He just showed up, day after day, quietly fixing what was broken, mowing the lawns, repairing doors, keeping everything spotless. Soon, his dedication caught the pastor's attention. The congregation saw a man reborn, a symbol of redemption through faith. So when the church leadership asked him to become a deacon, no one questioned it. They called it grace. They called it forgiveness. But beneath the surface, Smithers wasn't redeemed. He was rehearsing. rebuilding the mask that let him hide in plain sight. By the mid-1990s, he was living what looked like a picture-perfect life, a steady job, a loving family, and the respect of everyone around him. Yet somewhere deep inside, that same restless urge for control still waited. Quiet, patient, and ready to burn again. And in the spring of 1996, it finally did. The calm, helpful deacon was gone. In his place stood the man he'd always been hiding. Late one night in May 1996, Samuel Smithers picked up two women on the streets of Tampa, Denise Roach and Christy Cowan. Both struggling with addiction, both just trying to survive another day. He took them to a remote property he maintained for the church, a quiet stretch of land surrounded by trees and a pond that shimmered in the dark. There was a locked gate. No one could hear them scream. What happened next was brutal and deliberate. When it was over, Smithers dragged their bodies to the water's edge and pushed them in, hoping the pond would hide his sins. Then he went home to his wife, as if nothing had happened. Days later, when workers found the bodies, detectives noticed something strange. Blood on the property's tools, a freshly cleaned axe, and drag marks in the dirt leading to the water. When police came to question him, Smithers tried to act calm, but under pressure, the mask slipped. He confessed, first denying intent, then describing in chilling detail how it happened. He claimed he snapped, that he didn't mean to kill them, that he just lost control. But the evidence told a different story, one of planning, violence, and a man who felt untouchable behind the image of faith. His arrest shattered Plant City. People who had once prayed beside him sat in disbelief, wondering how a man who preached salvation could commit such evil. From that day forward, his name would never again be spoken in church, only in courtrooms, headlines, and death row. After his conviction in 1999, Samuel Lee Smithers was sent to Florida's death row, a concrete world of endless waiting. For more than 26 years, he sat in a 6-by-9 cell, writing letters, reading his Bible, and appealing the sentence that would one day end his life. His lawyers argued that Smithers wasn't pure evil, that he was a damaged man, shaped by abuse, brain trauma, and untreated mental illness. They said executing a 72-year-old man decades after his crimes wasn't justice. It was revenge. Others saw it differently. To the families of Denise Roach and Christy Cowan, those 26 years were mercy enough. They had spent almost 3 decades replaying what he did, while Smithers got to breathe, eat, and grow old. The debate split people in two. Is justice about punishment or closure? Does time erase guilt, or does it only remind us of what can never be undone? When the execution finally came in 2025, some called it the end of a nightmare. Others saw it as a grim reminder that even within the walls of a church, monsters can hide behind a smile and a Bible. In the end, Samuel Lee Smithers left behind no final words, no confession of faith, no apology. Only a legacy that forced Florida and everyone watching to confront the uneasy line between redemption and retribution. In the end, the story of Samuel Lee Smithers isn't just about 2 murders or a man who hid behind faith. It's about how darkness can live quietly among us, smiling, serving, and shaking hands on Sunday morning. He preached humility. He spoke of forgiveness. But inside he carried the same violence that had been carved into him as a child, a storm he never stopped feeding. The church saw a man redeemed. The world saw a man exposed. And when the needle finally emptied into his veins, Florida closed a chapter that began nearly 30 years earlier. But the questions he left behind are harder to bury. Can a lifetime of good deeds erase a moment of evil? And when justice comes decades later, does it still feel like justice? Or just another loss? Samuel Lee Smithers, the Deacon of Death, taught us that sometimes the monsters we fear the least are the ones standing right beside us.